The story begins at a time when humanity had already spent years trying to understand its place among the stars. People had crossed their own boundaries, built cities in orbit, settled small colonies on distant rocks, and slowly learned to live beyond Earth. Even with all this progress, the biggest challenge was not space itself, but the other civilizations that shared it. Among them was a powerful species called the Varkun. They were known for their strict rules, their disciplined fleets, and a reputation that made other species nervous. For years, humanity and the Varkun avoided direct conflict. They kept their distance, exchanged short messages, and tried to stay out of each other's way. But misunderstandings grew, and small incidents led to bigger tensions. Soon both sides found themselves stuck in a cycle of suspicion. People on Earth feared that a full war might break out. The colonies feared it even more, because they had fewer defenses. Humans didn't want a battle they couldn't win, and many believed the Varkun felt the same. That hope pushed diplomats, scientists, translators, and peace workers to step forward. They spent months trying to create common ground. Messages were exchanged, misunderstandings cleared, and slowly the idea of a ceasefire started to take shape. For the first time in years, people felt that peace might actually be possible. Fleet Command reduced patrols. Military ships returned to their home docks. Families who had been waiting for their loved ones finally saw them come home. News channels across the solar territories shared stories about a new era. Students discussed peace in classrooms. Workers in orbital stations felt safer walking through docking bays. Even the frontier settlers, who usually trusted no one, felt a bit more hopeful. The Varkun delegates arrived at a neutral station built specifically for interspecies meetings. Humans watched the broadcast with excitement, seeing tall armored figures standing beside human representatives. Although the Varkun's expressions were hard to understand, their calm posture suggested cooperation. The meeting lasted many hours. At the end, a shared announcement was made. A mutual ceasefire agreement had been reached. Humanity breathed a collective sigh of relief. Something that once felt impossible had finally happened. In the weeks that followed, life began returning to normal. Cargo ships moved freely. Traders reopened routes that had been closed for years. Scientists traveled to research stations without escort ships. People celebrated cautiously, but wholeheartedly. It felt like the beginning of something better. But even in this hopeful time, not everyone felt at ease. Some members of Fleet Command remained skeptical. They noticed small patterns in Varkun movements, unusual signals, and tiny errors in their communication logs. To most people, these details didn't mean anything, but to trained eyes, they were warning signs. Analysts tried to raise concerns, but higher authorities dismissed them, believing fear should not be allowed to ruin peace. After so many years of tension, no one wanted to go back to conflict, so the warnings were filed away, marked non-urgent. Meanwhile, ordinary people continued with their daily routines. Families enjoyed quieter nights. Workers spent less time worrying about emergency drills. Children born during the tense years grew up hearing adults say, "Things are finally changing for the better." Many believed that humanity had learned an important lesson about choosing dialogue over conflict. Across the colonies, miners returned to deep tunnels carved into distant asteroids. Engineers repaired old power grids that had been neglected during the tense years. Farmers on small terraformed worlds planted crops with hope that the next harvest would be peaceful. Even in space, on stations where steel corridors echoed with constant movement, people walked with lighter steps. Yet deep inside Fleet Command's records, the earlier signs grew more concerning. Patrol ships reported strange disappearances of harmless probes. Unclaimed signals appeared for seconds before vanishing. Some outposts detected shadow-like shapes at the edges of their scanners. None of it was considered proof of bad intentions, but together. The signs painted a worrying picture. One officer described it simply, "It feels like someone is watching us quietly." But the majority still believed in the pact. Humanity had already withdrawn forces from many sectors, leaving them lightly guarded as a gesture of trust. After all, peace could not exist if both sides kept pointing weapons at each other. The decision was meant to show goodwill, not weakness, and most people supported it. Even so, in these quiet months, a subtle fear remained under the surface. People tried not to talk about it, but it lingered in their minds. Whenever a ship passed silently across the night sky, or when communication delays lasted a bit too long, individuals wondered if the Varkon were truly sincere. Still, life went on. Teachers taught lessons about cooperation. News anchors interviewed experts who believed that the worst was behind them. Young cadets trained in academies, hopeful that they would never need to fight. Humanity's story seemed to be shifting toward unity and progress, but history often changes direction at the moment. When people least expect it, one such moment came at Helios Ridge, a peaceful area known mostly for mining work and scientific studies. Human workers there were relaxed, believing the ceasefire had brought safety. Ships used slower routes, no longer worried about sudden attacks. Researchers sent information regularly, focusing on new discoveries rather than defensive reports. Everything seemed normal. In cities across the solar territories, people watched evening broadcasts showing cheerful stories about trade, cooperation, and new plans for shared research with the Varkon. And although some still carried doubts, they were hopeful enough to let themselves believe in a better future. Humanity had done everything it could to avoid war. It had opened its hand, stepped back, shown trust, and tried to build something stable. The weeks after the pact felt like a soft breeze after a long storm. But storms often return when skies look the calmest. While most people celebrated, a small number continued to track irregularities. Their reports recorded tiny events, glitches, unknown vessel shapes, odd flight paths that made them uneasy. They worked late nights, reviewing data, checking logs, and trying to understand what they were seeing. They didn't know it yet, but they were looking at the first signs of a betrayal. Back on Earth, crowds gathered around large screens, showing the historic handshake between human and Varkon delegates. It was replayed often, symbolizing a future built on trust. Children were told that the image represented cooperation between species. Teachers encouraged young minds to dream about peaceful space exploration. Workers believed they could finally focus on building rather than defending. Even fleet officers who were once skeptical began to relax. Most of them had spent years preparing for possible conflict, so peace gave them a chance to reconnect with families, rest, and rebuild their lives. Many didn't want to believe that danger could still exist, but somewhere beyond the peaceful routes, far from Earth's celebrations, movements were taking place that no one expected. Signals were being exchanged between Varkon units in patterns that didn't match their official reports. Ships that should have been returning home were quietly gathering somewhere else. Each piece alone meant little, but together they formed a hidden picture. For the moment, though, humanity remained unaware. Hope was stronger than fear. Optimism filled the air. News channels talked about cooperation. Students wrote essays about unity. Workers planned for a future without constant emergency warnings. Humanity believed it was turning a new page. At this point, no one imagined that the coming days would change everything. For now, the world held on to peace. People felt safe, and the memory of years of tension slowly faded behind them. No one knew that the betrayal, silent, patient, and unexpected, was already on its way. Begins with a sense of calm that almost feels unreal. People across the solar territories are living their days normally. Workers travel to their shifts, students walk into classrooms, And families gather around screens to watch cheerful news about cooperation with the Varkon. The fear that once hung over everyone feels smaller, almost like a memory fading with time. Humanity believes the danger has passed, and that belief makes what comes next even more shocking. Helios Ridge, the place where everything changes, is a quiet region known mostly for mining minerals and hosting small research stations. The workers there are used to the sound of drills, cargo crates being moved around, and long hours inside dusty tunnels. Life in Helios Ridge is not exciting, but it is stable. People there don't expect surprises. They wake up, work, rest, and repeat. It is the kind of routine that makes a person feel safe, maybe even too safe. On the day the betrayal arrives, the workers start their morning as usual. Some are preparing machinery, some are checking data tablets, and some are just sipping hot drinks while waiting for the next task. A few technicians stand on an elevated platform, talking about their plans for the weekend. No one suspects anything strange. The sky above the outpost is clear. The scanners show nothing unusual. Communications with nearby stations are normal. And then, everything changes in a matter of seconds. It starts with a strange signal on one of the scanners. A young operator notices it first, just a blink on the screen, barely visible. He frowns and checks the system again, thinking it might be a glitch. The signal disappears, then reappears again, this time a bit stronger. Before he can report it, the entire screen fills with multiple signals. Dozens and hundreds, all appearing at once. At first, the workers believe it must be an error, the system malfunctioning. But then the alarms activate on their own. Red lights begin flashing around the outpost. A voice from the automated system announces a warning. The operators freeze in confusion. The signals match Varkon signatures. But the Varkon were not supposed to be here. Not after the peace pact. Not in a secured zone. Confusion turns into fear when the first wave reaches the outpost. In orbit above Helios Ridge, several human monitoring satellites detect fast-moving objects heading toward them. Before they can send full reports, the satellites lose connection. One by one, their signals vanish from the network. The loss is so sudden that the nearest command center believes the satellites have malfunctioned. But then more signals disappear. The pattern is too coordinated to be random. Back at the mining outpost, workers begin rushing toward communication terminals, trying to contact nearby stations. Most lines remain open for a few seconds, long enough for frightened voices to say they don't know what's happening. Then one by one, the calls drop. The main COM tower loses half its channels in minutes. The realization hits the workers slowly, but painfully. The Varkon didn't come for diplomacy. They didn't come to talk. They came to strike. Across the solar territories, at the Central Communication Center, operators watch the Helios Ridge feeds until the screens suddenly turn black. At first they assume it's a technical issue. But as they try to reconnect, more regions report problems. Outposts that were supposed to be safe suddenly send distress messages. Short, panicked, and broken messages appear on the screens. Unknown ships approaching. We thought it was a patrol. Something's wrong. We need immediate help. Then silence. Humanity's command centers scramble to understand what is happening. Officers run to their stations. Alarms echo through hallways, and emergency lights flicker. Minutes later, fleet commanders see the full picture on their main displays. The Varkon are attacking not one place, but multiple points at the same time. The pattern is clear. The betrayal was planned long before the peace pact. Shock spreads through the command rooms. The pact wasn't just broken. It was used as a tool to weaken humanity, to make them lower their guard, to ensure that when the attack came, humanity would be too scattered and unprepared to defend itself. In the mining outpost, the workers tried to gather essential data into storage units, hoping to send it as proof of the betrayal. But the system continues to fail. They shift their focus to safety sealing doors, activating shields, and trying to reach the emergency shelters. People help each other run down corridors, pulling those who fall or freeze in fear. Despite the chaos, their instinct is to protect one another. Outside the outpost, the sound of distant impacts begins. Nothing graphic, just the unmistakable sound of heavy strikes hitting the ground far away. Dust rises in the distance, shaking equipment inside the tunnels. The workers look at each other, knowing this is no drill. They had rehearsed emergency procedures many times, but no one expected to face a real event like this, especially after the peace agreement dot in orbit. Human patrol ships scramble to respond. These ships were not prepared for a large-scale attack. Most heavy ships had been sent to distant ports following the ceasefire. So the few patrolling ships act as quickly as they can, sending warnings to nearby stations, trying to intercept the Varkon forces. Their attempts are brave but limited. Many are heavily outnumbered. Fleet Command finally issues a full emergency alert across all territories. Sirens begin ringing in cities. Stations shift into lockdown mode. Families glued to their screens watch the emergency broadcast with wide eyes, hearing the words no one expected to hear again. Unidentified hostiles detected. Stay indoors. All communication networks may experience delay. People panic. Markets close at once. Schools activate emergency safety protocols. Workers in orbital factories gather near protected areas. Everyone feels the same fear, the fear of being caught off guard. After believing peace was assured. Across many colonized worlds, people search the skies nervously. Some see streaks of light as distant ships move through the atmosphere. Others hear emergency messages instructing them to move to safe zones. The betrayal feels unreal, almost impossible to accept. For weeks, they were told peace had arrived. Now everything is turning upside down. Back in the main command center, the fleet officers analyze incoming data with urgency. The Varkon attack is too coordinated to be spontaneous. They had studied human patrol schedules, communication routes, and defense gaps. They waited for humanity to relax. And when the timing was perfect, they struck. One officer summarizes it in a quiet voice that others can barely hear. This wasn't an attack. It was a trap from the beginning. Around him, the room fills with frustration, disbelief, and rising anger. Humanity had acted in good faith. They reduced their fleets, opened trade routes, and even welcomed Varkon delegates into their stations. All while the Varkon prepared a silent wave of destruction. On Helios Ridge, as the dust storms grow stronger from distant impacts, the workers take shelter. But even inside, they feel the vibrations in the ground. Some grip each other's arms. Others whisper prayers. Many simply stare at the walls in silence, trying to understand how everything changed so fast. A few of the more experienced workers try to keep everyone calm. They check the emergency supplies, ensure the doors are sealed, and remind people that humanity's fleet will respond soon. But even they cannot hide their fear completely. Suddenly, the entire outpost shakes from a closer impact. The lights flicker. Dust falls from the ceiling. People gasp. A few scream before covering their mouths. Then everything goes quiet again, except for the low hum of generators. At that same moment, emergency messages spread across the network. Many are incomplete, fading in and out, some filled with static. But the meaning is clear enough. Multiple human stations are under attack, and some have already fallen silent. Humanity realizes the truth. The ceasefire was a lie. The betrayal sweeps across the territories like a dark wave. People feel it in their homes, in their workplaces, in the way they look at the sky. It is not just the loss of safety. It is the feeling of being deceived deeply and intentionally. In major cities, Citizens gather in small groups, trying to understand what will happen next. Parents hold their children close. Workers talk in hushed voices. Many stare at their communication devices. Waiting for updates from the Fleet command issues a stern message to all humans. Stay calm. Stay indoors. Wait for further instructions. But beneath that calm message, there is a different energy inside the command rooms, one filled with determination. They know the betrayal will not go unanswered. Across the territories, people begin questioning everything they believed. How long had the Varkon planned this? What exactly were they trying to gain? And how far would they go? But despite the shock, despite the confusion and fear, one thing becomes clear in every mind. Humanity must respond. They must defend their homes, protect their people, and make sure this betrayal does not break them. The attack on Helios Ridge becomes the turning point. It marks the moment humanity realizes they can no longer rely on trust alone. They must stand together. And though they do not know it yet, this moment will become the beginning of a response so powerful it will change the entire conflict. The betrayal that was meant to weaken humanity will end, uniting them in a way the Varkan never expected. The betrayal shook humanity to its core, but it also brought something unexpected: unity. Before the attack, divisions ran deep. Different colonies had their own leaders, their own rules, and sometimes even rivalries. People had grown used to looking after themselves first, to prioritizing their own sectors over anyone else. But the moment Helios Ridge was attacked and communication lines went down across multiple stations, all of that changed. Humanity realized that survival depended on working together. In the hours after the attack, Fleet Command sent emergency messages to every colony, every city, every station. The messages were simple, clear, and urgent. Report status, assist neighbors, mobilize all available resources. Civilians and workers responded immediately. Traders redirected supply ships to deliver essential food and medical aid. Engineers left their private workshops and went to the nearest stations to repair damaged equipment. Even those who had no military training volunteered for support roles, helping wherever they could. It was not only the military who stepped up. People on colonies far from the front lines took it upon themselves to organize relief efforts. Families in orbital cities opened their homes to shelter evacuees. Communities worked together to provide food, water, and safety. In small settlements, neighbors who had rarely spoken before now shared tools, vehicles, and knowledge. People realized that their strength lay not in individual efforts, but in cooperation. Fleet Command itself was transformed almost overnight. Officers who had previously been frustrated with bureaucracy found themselves working side by side with volunteers from civilian sectors. Analysts, engineers, technicians, and navigators all joined the effort. Decision-making became faster. Plans were drafted, revised, and executed within hours rather than weeks. Humanity's usual delays and arguments were replaced by focus and urgency. In one orbital station, a group of engineers worked for hours, straight to reroute power to shield generators that had been partially damaged by earlier attacks. Their hands were blistered, their eyes tired, yet they worked with quiet determination. A young technician looked over at a coworker and said, "We can't wait for anyone else to fix this. We have to do it ourselves." That was the attitude that spread everywhere. If humanity wanted to survive, everyone had to do their part. Meanwhile, in communication hubs across human territories, operators worked around the clock. They were receiving fragmented signals from distant outposts. Many messages were broken, static-filled, or barely audible. Yet by piecing together the data, the operators began to map the movements of the Varkon forces. They could see patterns, predict attacks, and relay instructions to stations and ships that were still operational. At Helios Ridge, Workers who survived the initial strikes began coordinating with other outposts that had remained untouched. Using portable communication devices, they shared updates on damage, routes for evacuation, and emergency procedures. Small teams formed spontaneously, each taking responsibility for their own sections. They learned quickly how to anticipate the unexpected and protect each other. Even civilians in cities, not directly affected by the attacks, felt compelled to help. News of the betrayal sparked volunteer drives. People trained for emergency response, helped organize logistics, or offered skills they had never considered useful in a crisis. Someone who had spent years as a cargo transporter suddenly became an expert at delivering critical supplies under dangerous conditions. A retired engineer who had been living quietly on a moon settlement found himself redesigning shields and communication systems in record time. The unity was not only practical, but emotional as well. People supported each other in ways they had not before. Families shared fears and hopes. Communities held quiet vigils for missing workers. Messages of encouragement spread across networks, reminding everyone that even in fear, they were not alone. The human response was guided not only by survival instincts, but by compassion. Fleet Command also made a critical decision. They would not respond in panic or blind anger. They studied the Varkon movements carefully, analyzing every detail they could gather from scattered signals. The plan was to protect civilian zones, prevent further losses, and prepare for a counter-operation that would minimize risk while maximizing efficiency. Commanders held emergency meetings, often working through the night, discussing strategies in simple, direct terms. They knew that overcomplicating plans could cost lives. Across the colonies, old rivalries dissolved. Settlements that had once refused to share resources now offered everything they had to support each other. Supplies, vehicles, and manpower moved across sectors in a way that had never been seen before. Even young cadets, who had been training for years, volunteered to escort supply convoys and assist in repair operations. Every action reinforced the idea that humanity's survival depended on unity. In the days following the initial attacks, more detailed accounts emerged. Workers described how they had helped each other evacuate damaged zones. Engineers shared stories of improvised repairs that kept life support systems running. Pilots recounted the desperate maneuvers they had made to protect convoys from sudden attacks. Each story, whether small or large, contributed to a growing sense of determination. Humanity was not defeated. Humanity was learning, adapting, and preparing to fight back. The betrayal also ignited a sense of pride. People realized that despite fear and uncertainty, they could act decisively and responsibly. Ordinary civilians showed courage that had previously been invisible. They guided the wounded, managed essential resources, and maintained order in chaos. Military officers recognized this bravery and incorporated civilians into planning wherever possible. Humanity's response was no longer only about technology or weapons. It was about people and their ability to act as one. Even children and students contributed in small but meaningful ways. Schools organized data collection projects to help monitor local stations. Young cadets assisted with mapping signals, coordinating resources, and supporting families who had been evacuated. The crisis became a shared effort across all ages. Every contribution, no matter how small, helped strengthen the human network. The unifying effect of the betrayal extended into human culture as well. Communities began creating songs, messages, and stories about the events. They honored those who had stayed behind to protect others. They celebrated acts of bravery and quick thinking. These cultural responses served a dual purpose, remembering the losses and inspiring everyone to keep moving forward. Amid the chaos, humanity's communication networks improved. Engineers and operators developed new ways to maintain contact with scattered stations. Temporary relay satellites were deployed. Emergency codes were standardized. People realized that unity required not only trust, but also coordination. Through this effort, human systems became faster, stronger, and more resilient. The Varkon, who had expected surprise to paralyze humanity, began to notice something unusual. Humanity's scattered forces were responding in unexpected ways. Supply lines remained functional. Evacuated stations returned critical data. Even small outposts began sharing information with each other, creating a decentralized network of intelligence. The human response was adaptive, flexible, and surprisingly organized. Every human action during this period reinforced the same idea: no one would be left behind. Workers ensured that the injured reached safety. Families checked on neighbors. Engineers shared schematics. Pilots protected convoys. Civilians, soldiers, and technicians all contributed. Humanity was discovering a new strength. It was not in a single leader, a single fleet, or a single weapon, but in the combined will of its people. Even in the darkest moments, hope persisted. Children in safe zones drew pictures and sent them to stations under attack. Messages of encouragement reached those trapped in damaged outposts. Communities sang songs together over long-distance channels. Humanity's morale, often fragile in past crises, remained resilient this time. The betrayal that was meant to divide them had, instead, unified them. By the end of the first week, a clearer picture emerged. While losses had occurred, humanity had not been broken. They had adapted faster than expected. Outposts that could have fallen permanently were stabilized. Evacuated workers were moved to safety. Communication networks, though strained, were functional. And most importantly, humans had realized the power of working together. Fleet command and civilian leadership came together in a historic session. They recognized the bravery and effort of every individual, whether a pilot protecting a convoy, a worker managing emergency shelters, or a child sending hope through a simple drawing. They made a new commitment. Humanity would not simply survive. Humanity would respond in a way that would ensure betrayal could not succeed again. In this moment, across the solar territories, a quiet determination settled over humanity. The betrayal had revealed weaknesses, but it had also revealed strengths that had long been hidden. Every person, from the youngest cadet to the oldest engineer, felt a part of something bigger than themselves. Humanity's response was no longer just about defense. It was about proving that people could rise together in the face of treachery. The attack that was meant to intimidate became the spark that ignited unity. Every effort, every shared resource, every act of courage created a network of resilience that would sage. After the first wave of attacks, humanity faced the urgent task of assembling a response that could protect what remained and prepare for a counterattack. The betrayal had revealed weaknesses in communication, defense, and coordination, but it had also shown the incredible capacity of people to work together under pressure. Fleet Command, together with civilian leaders and volunteers, began organizing what would become known as the Retaliation Fleet. The process started with gathering every available ship, no matter its size or age. Carriers, freighters, research vessels, and even retrofitted cargo ships were inspected and upgraded wherever possible. Engineers worked day and night, repairing damaged engines, reinforcing hulls, and updating weapon systems. They improvised when parts were missing, repurposing old equipment or designing new mechanisms on the fly. In small workshops, teams created shields and sensors that could give older ships a chance against faster, more advanced Varkon vessels. Fleet Command also focused on training crews quickly. Many of the personnel had never seen combat at this scale, but they were fast learners. Veteran officers shared their knowledge, running drills that simulated attacks on multiple fronts. Crew members who had previously focused on logistics were now trained to assist in combat operations. From monitoring sensors to controlling auxiliary systems. Everyone had a role to play, and the understanding spread quickly that failure was not an option. Meanwhile, civilian volunteers contributed in remarkable ways. Engineers from distant colonies joined repair teams, sometimes traveling hundreds of kilometers to reach the nearest fleet dock. Scientists worked to improve navigation algorithms and predict enemy movements. Even children and students, unable to fight, contributed by managing communications networks, tracking messages, or providing morale support through creative broadcasts and encouraging messages. Every contribution, large or small, strengthened humanity's capacity to act. As the fleet took shape, Fleet Command carefully planned the strategy. They studied the Varkon attacks and noticed patterns in their approach. The enemy relied heavily on surprise and speed, striking where human forces were thin. Commanders realized that any direct confrontation without preparation could lead to disaster. Instead, they focused on coordination, prediction, and careful positioning. Every ship, every crew, and every station became part of a larger plan that relied on intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness of people to work together. At the central dockyard, the retaliation fleet slowly began to assemble. Hundreds of ships lined up, from massive carriers to nimble scouts. Engineers and technicians hurried along every corridor, checking systems, sealing doors, and making last-minute repairs. Pilots climbed into cockpits, testing controls and verifying communications. Crews rehearsed boarding procedures, emergency drills, and coordinated maneuvers. The scene was one of organized chaos, a mixture of fear, determination, and quiet pride. In the midst of all this, Fleet Command emphasized morale. Messages were broadcast to every ship, every station, and every civilian sector. Humanity was not just building a fleet, they were building hope. Leaders reminded everyone that their actions mattered, that even small contributions could save lives. The reminder had a profound effect. People who had felt powerless in the wake of the initial attacks now felt part of something larger, something meaningful. Training exercises were relentless. Teams practiced coordinated strikes, simulated evasive maneuvers, and learned to work with crews they had never met before. Pilots trained to rely on their instincts and trust one another in fast-moving combat situations. Engineers ran diagnostics on unfamiliar ships. Officers ran through hypothetical scenarios, testing communication protocols and decision-making under pressure. The preparation was exhausting, but it created a level of trust and cooperation that would prove essential. At the same time, the civilian population played a critical role in supporting the fleet. Shipyards received supplies from distant colonies, sometimes delivered under dangerous conditions. Food, water, medical equipment, and fuel were organized and transported with incredible efficiency. Volunteers managed distribution centers, coordinated logistics, and ensured that resources reached the places where they were needed most. Without this support, the fleet would have struggled to assemble in time. Communication systems were upgraded to handle the enormous volume of traffic. New relay satellites were deployed, and technicians worked to ensure that messages could reach even the most remote outposts. Civilian operators learned to coordinate with fleet officers, transmitting updates on enemy movements, resource availability, and personnel status. The effort created a network of information that allowed humanity to respond quickly to changing situations. As the fleet began to move, the sense of purpose was palpable. Ships left the docks in formation, moving through orbital lanes toward the edge of human-controlled space. Crews looked out at the stars, aware that they were heading into danger, but determined to protect their people. Civilians watched the launches from stations, offering words of encouragement over communication networks. Families held their breath, knowing that many of their loved ones would face life-threatening challenges. Yet proud of the courage and unity being displayed, the retaliation Fleet strategy relied on coordination between multiple types of ships. Heavily armed carriers would provide firepower, while scouts and corvettes monitored enemy movements and relayed information. Support vessels delivered supplies, repaired damage, and assisted with evacuations. Every part of the fleet had a role, and every role depended on the others. Success would require trust, timing, and quick thinking under pressure. Even in the midst of planning and preparation, stories of bravery began to emerge. Pilots who had previously only flown cargo ships volunteered to lead scouting missions. Engineers worked without rest to upgrade shields that had never been tested in combat. Civilians in distant colonies devised ways to reroute supplies to fleet positions under threat. These small acts, repeated across hundreds of locations, created a powerful sense of momentum. Humanity was not just reacting to the betrayal. They were transforming it into an opportunity to demonstrate their resilience as the fleet approached the contested areas. Intelligence reports indicated that the Varkan were gathering forces in several key sectors. The retaliation fleet did not engage immediately. Instead, they observed, analyzed, and positioned themselves strategically. The goal was to prevent further losses while maintaining the initiative. Every decision was made with the understanding that people's lives were at stake. Civilians, workers, and military personnel all understood that their actions could protect entire colonies without, in addition to technical preparation. Fleet Command focused on communication and leadership. Officers held briefings to ensure that everyone understood the plan. Messages emphasized adaptability. Crews were encouraged to make decisions on the fly when necessary, to support each other, and to maintain calm under pressure. Leadership was not about giving orders. It was about empowering people to act responsibly and effectively. The human element was critical. Trust between crew members grew stronger as they shared meals, stories, and responsibilities during long shifts. Engineers and pilots exchanged knowledge about systems and procedures. Civilians and military personnel collaborated closely, learning to depend on one another in ways they had never before. This human network, built on mutual respect and shared purpose, became as important as any weapon system. Finally, after weeks of preparation, the retaliation fleet reached its staging positions. The ships formed defensive perimeters, established observation points, and tested communication links one last time. Crews checked equipment, confirmed supplies, and performed final drills. Everyone was aware that the coming operations would be dangerous, but the shared determination to protect humanity gave them confidence. The Varkan, who had expected humanity to be slow, uncoordinated, or hesitant, were met with a force unlike anything they anticipated. Ships that were once isolated now operated as a single cohesive network. Pilots moved with precision, engineers ensured systems stayed operational, and civilians maintained logistics under extreme conditions. Humanity's response was no longer reactive. It was calculated, organized, and powerful. In the quiet moments before engagement, many crew members reflected on what had brought them to this point. They thought of the initial betrayal, the losses, and the chaos that had followed. They thought of their families, friends, and colleagues who had contributed in countless ways. They realized that the strength of humanity was not measured by technology or weaponry alone, but by the willingness of ordinary people to rise together when faced with extraordinary challenges. The retaliation fleet, fully assembled and coordinated, was now ready to face the enemy. Every ship, crew, and civilian support network represented a combined effort that spanned the solar territories. Humanity had transformed fear into action, uncertainty into preparation, and betrayal into a catalyst for unity. For the first time since the initial attacks, there was a quiet confidence across human sectors. People understood that the coming battle would be difficult, but they also knew that together they were stronger than any force that sought to divide them. Humanity's resilience, determination, and cooperation had created FL. The moment humanity had prepared for finally arrived. The retaliation fleet, fully assembled and coordinated, moved cautiously toward the regions where the Varkon forces had gathered. Every crew member understood the weight of responsibility. This was not just a military operation. It was a test of everything humanity had learned in the weeks after the betrayal. Their actions could determine the safety of colonies, families, and entire sectors. From the command bridge of the largest carrier, officers monitored the positions of their fleet and the scattered signals of the enemy. Observers and analysts worked quickly to predict possible movements. While the Varkon had advanced technology, humanity relied on coordination, adaptability, and the will of people working together. Each ship's path, each maneuver, and each communication was carefully calculated to ensure maximum efficiency with minimal risk. Pilots moved through the dark stretches of space, their eyes scanning for any unusual activity. Scouts flew ahead, sending detailed reports back to the command center. Even small vessels played a critical role. They carried supplies, monitored communications, and relayed information to ensure that the larger ships could act strategically. Every human effort, no matter how small, contributed to the greater plan. The Varkon had expected humanity to respond with hesitation, assuming fear or confusion would slow them down. Instead, the retaliation fleet moved with purpose. Fleet Command had learned from the betrayal that delay could be deadly. Human ships formed defensive formations while simultaneously gathering intelligence on enemy positions. The result was a balance of caution and initiative, a strategy designed to protect lives while maintaining control of the situation. In one small colony near the front lines, civilians watched from observation platforms as the fleet passed overhead. Children clutched their parents' hands, and workers exchanged nervous glances. Yet, despite fear, there was pride. They knew that each ship represented the combined effort of countless people: engineers, pilots, logisticians, volunteers, and ordinary citizens who had contributed in ways both visible and unseen. Every person's effort mattered. As the first engagements began, humanity's approach was not to attack recklessly, but to outmaneuver the enemy through coordination and strategy. Scouts identified vulnerable points, and smaller ships moved quickly to block or distract enemy movements. Heavily armed carriers provided cover, ready to support wherever needed. Engineers monitored shield performance and power levels, adjusting systems to maintain stability under pressure. Crew members on all ships experienced a mix of tension and determination. Pilots knew the stakes and relied on one another's training. Engineers worked under stress, but with focus, ensuring that critical systems functioned perfectly. Civilians who had joined to assist with communication and logistics were equally vital, keeping the flow of information uninterrupted. This combined effort turned the fleet into a single cohesive unit, capable of responding faster than any enemy force expected. Despite the intensity of the situation, human crews found moments of humanity. A pilot would check in on a teammate with a quiet joke to ease tension. Engineers would share snacks during long hours of work, offering encouragement. Volunteers coordinating communications would pass messages of hope from one station to another. These small acts strengthened morale and reminded everyone why they were fighting, not for conquest, but to protect their people and their way of life. The first major confrontation occurred near a cluster of asteroid belts that the Varkon had been using as staging areas. Scouts reported enemy positions, and the fleet adjusted its formation accordingly. The Varkon expected aggression, but humanity's approach was calculated. Ships moved in ways designed to protect one another, using asteroids as cover and positioning themselves to control the battlefield. Human pilots executed maneuvers with precision. They coordinated through encrypted communications, calling out enemy positions and relaying instructions to ensure no ship was left vulnerable. Even those in support roles contributed. Engineers guided power distribution to shields. Technicians monitored sensor arrays. And communications teams maintained contact with distant stations to coordinate reinforcements if needed. The Varkon, though technologically superior in some areas, were surprised by humanity's adaptability. Humans improvised in real time, adjusting strategies based on movement patterns and changing conditions. Fleet Command emphasized flexibility over rigid tactics, allowing each ship to respond effectively to unexpected challenges. The result was an organized, unpredictable force that was difficult for the Varkon to counter. Amid the operation, small acts of bravery emerged that were never captured in official reports, but made a profound difference. A pilot would fly close to an asteroid to draw enemy attention away from a vulnerable carrier. An engineer would reroute power manually after a system failure, saving a ship from damage. Civilians managing communications would quickly decipher a critical signal and alert the fleet to a potential trap. Each act, while small alone, contributed to the success of the operation as a whole. The battle lasted for hours, though it felt longer to those involved. Tension was constant, but so was focus. Every crew member understood that hesitation could cost lives, yet panicking would be equally dangerous. Humanity relied on training, preparation, and trust in one another. Communication, coordination, and careful observation became more important than raw firepower. Even as the fight continued, humanity's collective spirit shone through. Pilots looked out at the stars and thought of their families. Engineers reflected on the sacrifices made by colleagues across the colonies. Civilians who had joined the effort felt pride, knowing their contributions kept the fleet operational. Every person found motivation not in fear alone, but in hope, the hope of defending what mattered most. The battle's turning point came when human scouts discovered the location of the Varkon command ships. Fleet Command acted decisively. Using coordinated maneuvers, they isolated the command units from the rest of the enemy fleet. Smaller ships created distractions, while carriers delivered precise strikes to prevent escape. The operation was not reckless. It was calculated to minimize risk to human lives while maximizing strategic advantage. During this critical phase, human crews worked together seamlessly. Pilots relied on signals from engineers and communications officers. Support vessels moved quickly to repair minor damage in the middle of combat. Civilians monitoring logistics ensured that critical supplies, such as fuel and energy, were available to maintain momentum. Every part of the operation depended on trust and cooperation, proving that humanity's greatest strength was not technology alone, but the people behind it. By the end of the engagement, the Varkon forces were forced to retreat. Their command ships had been disabled or captured, and their smaller units scattered. Humanity had achieved a decisive victory, not by overwhelming firepower, but through strategy, coordination, and adaptability. The retaliation fleet proved that when people work together with determination and intelligence, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. As the fleet regrouped, officers acknowledged the bravery of everyone involved. Pilots, engineers, civilians, and volunteers were all recognized for their contributions. Stories of courage spread through communication networks, inspiring others and reinforcing the idea that humanity's response was stronger because it was collective. Civilians on nearby colonies celebrated quietly. They knew the battle was not over, but they had seen the proof of humanity's resilience. Families hugged, workers shared news, and communities felt pride in their collective effort. The success reinforced the importance of unity and the belief that no challenge was insurmountable when people acted together. In the following days, Fleet Command analyzed the battle, identifying lessons and preparing for future operations. Every ship and crew was evaluated, not to find fault, but to improve coordination, readiness, and strategy. The goal was to ensure that humanity remained strong, adaptable, and capable of responding to any threat. Beyond technical lessons, the human element remained central. Crew members reflected on their shared experiences, understanding that bravery, trust, and compassion were as vital as any weapon system. Engineers and pilots continued to collaborate closely. Civilians remained essential to communication and logistics, and communities reinforced one another through mutual support. The battle became more than a military victory. It became a symbol of humanity's strength, resilience, and ability to unite under pressure. People realized that success was not measured solely by technology or strategy, but by the will of individuals to act responsibly, courageously, and collaboratively. Humanity had faced a betrayal that could have shattered them. Instead, they adapted, coordinated, and overcame. The retaliation fleet's success demonstrated that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, unity and determination could turn the tide. The lesson was clear. Together, humanity could protect what mattered most, overcome deceit, and ensure that treachery would not go unchallenged. And so, as the fleet returned to safe zones, every crew member, engineer, and volunteer felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for the victory, but for the demonstration of what people could achieve when they acted as one. Humanity had proven that courage, cooperation, and determination. After the first decisive victory, humanity did not become complacent. Fleet Command understood that the Varkon betrayal had revealed vulnerabilities, and even a single lapse could cost dearly. Every crew member, every engineer, every civilian volunteer remained vigilant. The goal was not only to defend what they had regained, but also to ensure that humanity could respond faster and stronger in the future. Across the colonies, the impact of the fleet's success became clear. Families who had feared for their loved ones now began to breathe a little easier. Communities shared stories of resilience and bravery. Even those who had not been directly involved in the battles felt a renewed sense of hope. People understood that humanity's strength came not only from technology and strategy, but from unity and determination. Fleet Command organized a series of review sessions. Every engagement, every maneuver, every decision was analyzed. Officers discussed successes and failures, not to blame, but to improve. Pilots and engineers shared first-hand experiences, highlighting unexpected challenges and innovative solutions. Civilians who had assisted with communications, logistics, and repairs contributed insights, showing how their efforts had shaped the outcomes. The lessons learned would strengthen humanity for years to come. At the same time, communities worked to rebuild what had been damaged during the initial attacks. Engineers repaired stations, restored power grids, and reinforced structures. Civilians volunteered in record numbers, transporting supplies, assisting with repairs, and ensuring that recovery moved quickly. In small settlements and large orbital cities alike, people realized that their efforts mattered. They were contributing directly to humanity's survival and strength. The emotional recovery was just as important as the practical one. Families reunited with loved ones who had been in dangerous sectors. Friends and neighbors supported each other through fear and uncertainty. Communities held gatherings to share stories of courage and to honor those who had made sacrifices. The human spirit, tested by betrayal and battle, began to shine brighter than ever. Fleet Command did not wait for the Varkon to strike again. Instead, they developed proactive strategies. Scouts and observation stations were positioned in remote areas to monitor enemy movements. Supply lines were fortified and made flexible to avoid disruption. Communication networks were upgraded with redundancies to ensure that even if one station fell, others could continue to operate. Every detail was designed to create a resilient network that could respond quickly to any threat, Training continued at all levels. Pilots refined their maneuvers, engineers tested new defensive systems, and civilians learned advanced coordination techniques. Even children and students contributed by managing simulations, monitoring communications, and assisting in small, meaningful ways. Humanity had learned that every individual could make a difference. The culture of cooperation that emerged after the betrayal became the foundation of strength. Despite the successes, caution remained essential. Humanity could not underestimate the Varkan. Intelligence reports suggested that the enemy was regrouping and learning from their failures. Fleet Command emphasized that vigilance and strategy must continue. Crews were reminded to stay alert, to communicate constantly, and to work together. Every member of the fleet understood that survival depended on discipline as much as courage. In the months following the engagement, humanity began to reclaim lost territories and secure vulnerable sectors. Small outposts that had been abandoned were rebuilt. Supply routes reopened. Communication lines were restored and strengthened. People everywhere understood that each repaired station, each fortified colony, and each prepared crew was a step toward long-term security. At the heart of humanity's recovery was the sense of shared purpose. People no longer acted in isolation. Engineers, pilots, civilians, and students collaborated across great distances. Information flowed freely between colonies and stations. Decision-making became more inclusive, drawing on the experience and knowledge of every participant. Humanity realized that its strength was not just in its fleet, but in its ability to act as one. One of the most powerful lessons was the importance of adaptability. During the initial betrayal, humans had been caught off guard by unexpected tactics. In response, Fleet Command developed flexible strategies that could adjust in real time. Crews were trained to anticipate the unpredictable. Engineers designed systems that could be modified quickly, and civilians learned to support operations under changing conditions. Humanity became a force that could respond to any challenge. The retaliation fleet, now fully prepared and more cohesive than ever, became a symbol of human determination. Each ship represented countless hours of work, coordination, and courage. Pilots and engineers took pride in their roles, understanding that their contributions directly affected the safety of millions. Civilians who had volunteered felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing they had helped shape a force capable of defending humanity. As humanity extended its influence into contested sectors, colonies began to thrive once more. Trade resumed along safer routes, scientific exploration restarted, and communities rebuilt stronger than before. The betrayal that had once brought fear and chaos became a catalyst for growth and improvement. People realized that adversity, when met with unity and determination, could strengthen the bonds that held them together. Stories of bravery and cooperation spread widely. Pilots who had executed daring maneuvers were celebrated, alongside engineers who had kept systems operational under extreme stress. Civilians who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes were recognized for their essential contributions. The culture of collaboration became central to humanity's identity. Everyone understood that survival and success depended on acting together, not alone. Fleet Command continued to innovate. Engineers designed new defensive systems. Logistics teams improved supply management, and communication networks were upgraded with redundancies. Every aspect of human operations became more resilient, ensuring that even if another betrayal occurred, humanity would be ready. People everywhere felt a renewed sense of confidence. They knew that no matter the challenge, their collective strength could overcome it. Children and students played a crucial role in the cultural recovery. Schools incorporated lessons about cooperation, problem-solving, and resilience. Young people participated in simulations and exercises, learning the importance of teamwork and preparation. The next generation understood that their future depended on the choices and efforts of everyone. Creating a lasting culture of unity, Months turned into a year, and humanity's recovery was complete in a way that was more than just physical. People had learned the power of trust, communication, and collaboration. They had discovered that courage was not just about individual acts, but about the willingness to support others. The betrayal that had once threatened to break them became a defining moment that strengthened their bonds. The Varkon, observing humanity's recovery and proactive strategies, realized that their attempts at division had failed. Humanity was no longer a passive, reactive force. They had become organized, adaptive, and resilient. The retaliation fleet was not just a military power. It was a symbol of what people could achieve when united. The Varkon understood that any future attempts to deceive or attack would be met with a force far stronger than before. In every sector, people reflected on what had been accomplished. Families celebrated reunions, communities honored courage, and colonies thrived. The lessons of the betrayal were remembered, not with fear, but with pride. Humanity had faced deceit and danger, adapted quickly, and emerged stronger. Every individual contribution, from the smallest act to the largest, had shaped the outcome. Humanity had transformed fear into action, chaos into organization, and betrayal into a catalyst for growth. The experience taught people the value of trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility. People realized that their greatest weapon was not firepower alone, but the combined will and determination of millions working together. As the solar territories became secure once more, a sense of calm and achievement spread. People returned to their daily lives, but with a renewed awareness of what they could accomplish when united. Engineers, pilots, civilians, and volunteers continued to maintain systems, train crews, and improve coordination. Humanity understood that vigilance and cooperation were permanent responsibilities, not temporary measures. In quiet moments, individuals reflected on the journey from fear to triumph. They remembered the initial shock of betrayal, the chaos of the attacks, and the determination that had followed. They realized that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt, to cooperate, and to act together in the face of uncertainty. The lessons learned would endure for generations, guiding people in all future challenges. Finally, across the colonies and stations, humanity celebrated not just survival, but resilience. The betrayal that could have destroyed them had instead united them. People understood courage, determination, and cooperation were more powerful than any deception. Humanity had proven that when people act together, they can overcome even the most formidable threats. And in that unity, in the shared effort of millions, humanity found its true strength. The stars above were still vast and unpredictable, but humans now knew